Welcome back. You're watching our special discussion here on President Obama's visit to India. We're in conversation with Chandrashekhar, the president of NASSCOM. So you're hopeful that at least a discussion on the totalization agreement will take place at the end or of this summit. But what about other issues? You know, Srivatsa Krishna sitting in Bangalore has drawn up a list of things that he would like to see at the end of this. Advanced immigration facilities, for instance, setting up a consulate in Bangalore, which is really our Silicon Valley or equivalent of our Silicon Valley. What is the small stuff that you would like to see being put together at the end of this?
Well, there are a lot of things, and just to start with the totalization which you mentioned, I think we want to see more than just a discussion.
Yeah, sure.
Recognizing the fact that, you know, it has not yet been discussed, it's not yet on the table, it would be good to see a statement saying both sides have agreed to work towards a totalization agreement. I think that's the kind of realistic expectation that we would have.
What is the indication that you've gotten? I know NASSCOM has been lobbying, but what is the indication that you get? Is it going to be on the table or not?
Well, this is something on which we haven't really, seen any indication either way. So I think that is something which will have to come out at the government level discussions.
Has India been too soft on this issue?
I believe that we need to be much more assertive. There's no doubt about that. We need to be much more assertive. How can we accept that both countries can sign similar agreements with 18 other countries, as many as 18 other countries, and yet not have one between themselves for whatever reason? These are unacceptable situations.
But are we talking tough, is the question on this issue?
Well, I certainly hope so. I believe that we need to be firm and that we will be firm.
Okay. What about the other list of things that you would like to achieve at the end of this?
As far as the immigration is concerned, there's a set of things which we don't want them to do and a set of things which we would want them to do. And because the immigration threat is something that has been looming in different forms, we saw the Senate bill earlier, which thankfully lapsed in December last year. But now we have the the executive order, which was issued at the end of last year. But there is a guidance on L1 visas, which I used quite extensively by corporates, which is due to come out, which would define, what specialized knowledge is. We've seen examples, in some of the other countries like Canada, where some of these definitions have proved, very narrow, very impractical, requiring lots of documentation. At the end of the day, very restrictive. So we do not want that these kind of restrictions should be brought in.
But let's be clear, there is going to be an element of quid pro quo here, isn't it? I mean, if India wants a totalization pact, if we want easier immigration facilities and visas and so on and so forth, as far as the IT sector is concerned, the US is going to ask for India to put something on the table. My sense is, or my gut tells me, that it will be things like multi-brand retail, which at least at this point in time, this government is going to be unable to accede to.
Yeah, I don't think you can have a meaningful discussion when one side is negotiating what it won't do against what it wants you to do. I think that's not the way in which a partnership dialogue takes place, because there's no end to that kind of a thing. You can't say, I will put something negative, and then, by the way, I'll remove it if you do this for me.
Sure.
I don't think that that is a very acceptable way of negotiating. So in terms of what we want or what we are actually asking, I will talk about them in these two categories, as I said. What we don't want them to do is to issue restrictive guidance. We don't want them to continue with other provisions like, the Zadogra bill, which actually imposed costs, which is lapsing in September, and which certainly we don't want that kind of a thing should continue. There's been a very high rejection rate. Given the costs involved, the high rejection rate means that there are mounting costs. So all these are negatives which need to be removed to make sure that the processes work well. In terms of actually what we want, the facilitation is one part of it. I think what you mentioned is certainly something which will help in terms of ground level facilitation. But in terms of actual asks, we've also suggested that a one-year visa and an E3 visa for skilled workers is something which would be helpful, the kind that the US, for example, has with countries like Philippines.
Honest answer. Do you believe that we are likely to see a breakthrough on any of these, on the demands that you're putting up?
Well, I certainly think that there will be some assurance, that's what we expect, that there will not be impediments created and that there will be conditions created to enable the movement of workers. This is an industry which depends on the movement of people.
Okay. Subir, Gokarn, in all negotiations, there is an element of give and take. At this point in time, the U.S. is happy with the movement that India has made in certain sectors, insurance and so on and so forth. They would definitely like to see further liberalization of FDI caps, whether it's defense or insurance. And of course, there's a question mark on these ordinances going through Parliament and when they do go through Parliament. President Obama has said that India and the U.S. can actually work together to address global issues and global challenges. What would you say is likely to be the pivotal areas of discussion this time around, sort of from a broad perspective?
Well, I think you did refer to the bilateral investment treaty, and I think that's something that is relatively sort of, let's say, proximate in the sense that it is broad-based. In and of itself doesn't necessarily ensure that large amounts of investment resources come into the country from the U.S. But it commits both sides to certain kinds of behavior. It commits to the protection of the foreign investor, the counterparty investor interests. And it also commits, quite importantly, if you look at the U.S. template on bilateral investment treaties, it commits the partners, the signatories, to following a particular kind of policy regime. And that is entirely consistent with the broad sort of thrust of reforms and market-friendly and investor-friendly policies that this government has been talking about. So I don't see any potential sort of stumbling blocks in doing that. Keep in mind that Indian investment in the U.S. is also becoming significant. We have the Tata Group there in the Green River. We have the Birla Group with the Novelis. A number of other companies have...
Sure. But do you believe, Subir, Gokarn, that in order for us to go from the current $100 billion of bilateral trade to $500 billion, which is the target that the U.S. has set, will we be able to do it minus a bilateral investment treaty but with deeper engagement, or will it require a bilateral investment treaty to be put in place for us to get anywhere close to that number?
I don't think a bilateral treaty will, in and of itself, get us that big leap. It's a quantum leap. It's 5 times in 5 years. That's an unbelievably high growth rate. So business as usual is not going to do it, that's for sure. What else is going to do it? A bilateral investment treaty might help. It will certainly not hurt. It might help. But more than that, I think we've got to look at completely new areas of engagement, completely new channels of trade opening up. And here, when we talk about defense and high-tech and so on, those are sectors where these treaties actually might be of some value, because these are relatively US-specific in nature. So treaties, once you open it up to one country, you've got to basically treat everybody more or less the same.
Absolutely.
So, but given the comparative advantage of the US in some of these sectors, which is what they're pushing, a treaty will certainly facilitate it. It cannot guarantee it, of course, but it can certainly facilitate.
Okay, Kiran Mazumdar, I'm going to give you the last word on this program. We've seen a lot of forward movement on many contentious issues after the joint declaration in September. What, to your mind, will qualify as the big highlight this time around? Does your gut tell you that it's likely to be on the defense side as well as the energy side, where we are likely to see 2 broad agreements being inked by both countries? Where do you believe we're going to get the headlines from at the end of this summit?
Well, I think if you hear the sort of discussions happening at both sides, I think climate change is going to be a very important part of the agenda. And based on that, I think you're going to see some agreements signed in terms of green credits, carbon credits. I think you're going to see a strong focus on renewable energy. I think the whole solar energy aspect is going to be extremely important. But I just want to also make a small comment on, the Make in India kind of agenda that we would like to sort of see some visibility on. Because again, I believe that this is an area which we should focus on and see if we can put a lot of these through the automatic approval route.
Okay.
Because right now there are a lot of deterrents that is not really seeing the serious investment getting into this area. So I think some thinking has to go in that area, especially in our sector, where there is a lot of interest to invest in creating manufacturing facilities in India for the pharma sector.
Right.
But the FIPB route is certainly a deterrent. So just like it has been, just like medical devices have been put through the automatic approval route, I think greenfields pharma manufacturing should go the same way. Yeah, and I also believe that I think there is a lot of interest in startups in India.
Yeah.
And I think that's another area which needs to, be looked at in a very different way. Because I think, you are seeing a lot of the technology companies being lapped up by large tech companies.
Absolutely.
And this is a very welcome sign. And because you are seeing a lot of VC investment coming in from the US, and this needs to be nurtured and encouraged in a very big way.
And not taxed, and we hope that before the US actually starts looking at this sector to nurture it, our government changes its... Yeah, and I hope our government changes its position as far as nurturing startups are concerned, and the way that we tax investments coming into this sector. But we're completely out of time.
And I also believe that...
Unfortunately, we're completely out of time. Kiran, Mazumdar, Subir, Gokarn, Mr. Chandrashekhar and Pratibha Singh, appreciate you joining us here on this special CNBC TV 18 discussion as we talk about what could be potentially the areas of opportunity and the challenges that both sides will need to pass through before we can get any further movement as far as the Indo-US dialogue is concerned. Thanks very much for watching.